So we're going to, this is based on Dr. Amen's new Healing ADD book, which came out in November, and we're going to talk about 3 parts really: myths about ADD and how to know if you have it, the 7 different subtypes of ADD, and then some strategies for healing ADD. There are strengths to having ADD. You can, often people with ADD are intelligent, and my experience is that people with ADD tend to be above average in intelligence, creative, spontaneous, successful. Many leaders have ADD. Next slide, please. So Alexander Graham Bell, Jim Carrey, Michael Phelps, a couple others are in there, Terry Bradshaw, and this guy there. Next slide. Now, if there's a fire, most people run away from the fire, but some with kind of the hyperactive impulsive type of ADD run toward a fire. So many people in this line of work who crave excitement, are like that. Just tell a little bit of a story. One of my colleagues saw a patient who had what seemed to be an extreme form of hyperactive impulsive ADD, and the doctor was trying to guess what the patient did for a hobby, and he said, because he was thinking of thrill seeking, so motorcycle racing, no; skydiving, no; flew a plane, no. So finally the doctor gave up, and so the doctor says, "I give up, what is it you do?" And the man said, "I'm a wing walker." So me, I'd be I'm even breaking out in goosebumps thinking about it, but this guy felt calmest on a wing. So we talk about, for some of these patients, we talk about ADD as being adrenaline deficit disorder. The adrenaline they feel kind of wakes up their prefrontal cortex. ADD has been described for over 100 years, and in fact we've used stimulant medication for ADD for more than 100 years. Far longer than we've actually used antibiotics in medicine. Let's stop and think about it. Next slide, please. Is ADD overdiagnosed? Not a week goes by that I don't read something in the papers or magazines or see something online about we're overdiagnosing, we're drugging, and so forth. Maybe it is overdiagnosed, but it often is underdiagnosed in women, and it's often underdiagnosed, when I say women I mean females really, including children, and it's underdiagnosed in the non-hyperactive, more introverted males. Next slide. We do think that ADD is increasing in prevalence. This may well be due to limiting physical education in schools, video games, toxins in the environment, and diets. Diets are changing. What are some of the causes? We have genetic issues, brain trauma. We see a lot of brain trauma here, food allergies, lead exposure, oxygen deprivation, and infections like Lyme and other infections. The harder most people with ADD try, the worse it gets. And many people with ADD have been told, "Oh, you're not trying hard enough," et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, my experience is that many of them have been trying harder than people try without ADD. This is a slide. This is showing the surface of the brain, the underside view of the brain. This is the top, the front of the head. This is the back. And when people with ADD try harder, the prefrontal cortex in this area shuts down. So the harder they try, the less well they do. It's kind of a vicious circle. Next slide, please.
Okay, Dr. Annibali, nobody on the webinar can hear you.
I bet people on the webinar can hear me now. I'm sorry. I am sorry.
All right.
Okay. Not very good, is it? Not very good. Okay. So as I was saying, you have low prefrontal cortex functioning for ADD. So this is somebody before treatment. This is somebody after treatment. And you can see that the prefrontal cortex area is better. So next slide, please. Would everybody outgrow it? I was taught that in medical school and residency that most people would outgrow it by the age of 18, but that's not true. At least half the children diagnosed with ADD continue to have symptoms in adulthood. And what happens is that those who are hyperactive and impulsive, they become less so physically, but the kind of the hyperactivity becomes a mental hyperactivity. Next slide, please. If it's untreated, 33% don't finish high school, half abuse drugs or alcohol. Weight issues, depression, job failure, divorce, relationship issues, legal issues, incarceration, maybe even Alzheimer's disease. Hallmark ADD symptoms, a short attention span. Next slide, please. Okay. This is, you know, for that one, I wasn't sure whether they're learning sign language or something. I think not. Next slide, please. Easily distracted. Let's see that. Tags irritate them. Dr. Raymond likes to tell the story that with his first wife, who had pretty significant ADD, when they got married and they moved in together, one of the first things she did was go through all his clothing and cut out all the tags because she expected that he would be as sensitive to the tags as she was. Tags irritate them. Disorganization, next slide, yeah. So islands of organization, disorganization, poor follow-through, and then impulse control issues. And how do you know if you have ADD? Well, if you answer yes to 3 or more of these, you may well have it. Next slide, please. This is a slide about the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is in the front of the brain. We talk about the inferior orbital prefrontal cortex, which is the lower surface on the front of the brain. And we call it the brain's CEO. It mediates or performs executive functions, focus, attention, concentration, goal setting, judgment, impulse controls. And that's the area of the brain that's negatively affected in most of the subtypes of ADD. Go ahead, please. This is an example of a not healthy prefrontal cortex. This is what it can look like on our brain scans, and you see these big holes here in the front of the brain. The individual doesn't literally have holes in their brain. This is the way the computer pictures show us that the functioning is lower in that part of the brain. Steps to healing ADD, knowing if you have it or somebody has it, know your type. Supplements and medication can be helpful. Optimize your diet. There's some behavioral strategies, and get your family involved. It's often a family affair. Next slide, please. And the subtypes of ADD. Okay. So one of the most important things that Daniel Lehman has done is to subtype various conditions. So using scans and the symptomatic information that he obtained from different patients, he's broken down ADD and anxiety and depression and addictions into various subtypes. And the interventions that are helpful for the various subtypes differ depending on which subtype you have. So if we could have next slide. So this is what healthy brain scans look like. We're looking at the underside views of the brain. We call this the surface view. This is the front, this is the back. Temporal lobes are here. We call this the active view because it shows us areas of activity. This is the limbic system area here. This is the cerebellum. So next slide, please. So these two patients both have an ADD diagnosis, and we're looking again, this area, this individual has very low activity in the limbic system. This individual has very high activity, essentially a ring of fire pattern. So two individuals with the same label, but the treatments would be very different than if you gave this individual the treatment you'd give this one would have a very hard time with it. So this is why it's important to subtype. So the 7 ADD subtypes, the first one is, we'll just run through these quickly and then we'll go through them individually. So classic, inattentive, overfocused, temporal lobe, limbic, ring of fire, and then the newest one is the anxious ADD, which Dr. Amen added in the latest edition. So let's see here. So neurotransmitters in ADD, dopamine is important, and when we give the stimulant medications like Ritalin and Adderall and Vyvanse, they increase dopamine in the front of the brain, which improves focus and motivation and many of the other ADD symptoms. And serotonin is important. Serotonin can be dysregulated in a number of ways. It's out of balance in the overfocused ADD subtype. And when you increase dopamine in the brain, it's a bit like a teeter-totter. If you increase dopamine, serotonin goes down. So the more, when you will often see if you help somebody with their ADD, obsessional traits can get worse, because when serotonin is low, OCD gets worse. GABA is the major calming neurotransmitter in the brain, and if you have a ring of fire, you'd like to increase GABA. Okay, so this is classic ADD. This would be somebody who has both inattentive and hyperactive impulsive traits. And they have, on the scan, you see these big holes in the front of the brain, meaning that the activity in the inferior orbital prefrontal cortex is not so great. Next slide, please. Okay, so they have low dopamine, attention is short. You could run through those quickly. Attention, distractibility, disorganization, procrastination, poor impulse control. They would be impulsive and hyper. Next slide. So this would be an example of what the scans would look like. You see low activity in the front of the brain. Poor Sally. And classic ADD treatment, you want to boost dopamine, certainly. We have supplements that can do that. L-tyrosine is the supplement. SAMe could do that. Stimulant medications or stimulating antidepressants can do that. Exercise can be helpful. A specific diet, fatty acids. About exercise, one of my patients a few years ago was a very hyper ADD guy, and he benefited from a number of the interventions we did, including medication and supplements, but he found that he needed to exercise rigorously. And unfortunately, this guy broke his ankle, and he used to go out and like run hard every day for an hour. And he wasn't able to do that, of course, and I thought the poor guy would explode because he had all this tension building up and wasn't able to exercise. Inattentive ADD, this is type 2 in Dr. Amen's system. Can look similar to the scans of type 1. So what you see, the SPECT scans look similar to type 1, and they have inattention, but they don't have hyperactivity or impulsivity so much. So focus, attention, concentration, those kinds of things. Often can be introverted. Common in girls, these are the girls who seem to be dreamy, spacey. They're not causing trouble, so they're often overlooked early in elementary school. Next slide, please. These are images before and after of Brianne, who was Dr. Amen's daughter. So before treatment, she had very severe decreases in her prefrontal cortex, and this is a day later with stimulant medication, so brain remarkably improved. Again, what do you do? Boost dopamine, high protein diet, stimulating supplements or medication, exercise, and so forth. Type 3 is overfocused ADD. This is a significant contribution that Dr. Amen made. And what we're looking at here is really markedly increased activity in the anterior cingulate section of the brain. So if we could see. So the cingulate, when you have trouble with your cingulate, when there's too much activity, you can have difficulty shifting attention, you can get stuck. We call this the brain's gear shifter. These individuals have a low serotonin. When your serotonin is low, your cingulate is more active, and low dopamine because the prefrontal cortex is low. Let's see what else they say. Okay. Let's see the next. Okay. I think we've seen that one. So brain's gear shifter, go from task to task, move from idea to idea, etc. Go with the flow. People with too much cingulate activity tend to get stuck, And if you'd like them to do something, often it's helpful to state the obvious. You know, if you'd like them to go to Home Depot with you, you say, I'm going to Home Depot, you don't want to go with me, do you? Yeah, I do. That can work with kids too. So they get stuck, they worry, etc. Grudges, upset if things don't go their way, argument, oppositional, error detection. Family members also get stuck. So here, this is fairly common, and we often do see married couples together. So you see here you have a rather severely ADD husband, an overfocused wife. So this guy is, you know, by her view, careless, disorganized. Every little thing he does is wrong. It's driving her crazy. By his point of view, she's rigid and saps all the, you know, worries too much and you know, just distills all the fun out of life. Okay. So what do you do if you have somebody like that? They need boosting of serotonin and dopamine. They don't do as well on a high protein diet because it tends to increase dopamine more than serotonin. Okay. Temporal lobe ADD. Temporal lobe, this is fairly common actually. So you'll see somebody with typical inattentive ADD issues. And then they'll have temporal lobe issues as well. They can have learning and memory issues, moodiness, anger, temper outbursts, even rage outbursts. And here's an example. So this individual has low prefrontal cortex functioning and also low temporal lobe functioning. So there we go. Temporal lobe, that left temporal lobe is not looking good at all. So you want to stabilize the temporal lobes first with something like GABA, which is a natural stimulant, or medication like Lamictal or Depakote. And only then, after you've stabilized the temporal lobes, can you successfully give somebody a stimulant. If you give them a stimulant before stabilizing the temporal lobes, they often get more irritable, moody, angry. High protein diet can help. Limbic ADD, so ADD symptoms plus sadness, negativity, moodiness, etc. Glass half empty, poor appetite, social isolation. And the treatment is to use stimulating supplements or medications that boost the brain and enhance mood. So Wellbutrin could be an example of that, Effects or Cymbalta. A ring of fire, this is in a way half ADD, half a mood disorder. We see it more often in kids, some teens. It's rare to see it in an adult, although we have seen it in adults. Moodiness, distractibility, too many thoughts. A few years ago, one child told me that his brain felt as if he had 2 or 3 radios playing different stations in his head. Oversensitive to light, sounds, touch. Ring of fire may be an early representation of a bipolar disorder. A small percentage of these go on to have a bipolar diagnosis as an adult. We'll also see the impact of allergies, diet, toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, inflammation, infections. You can see Lyme disease caused that. What do we do? Often a special diet, an elimination diet, or a gluten-free, dairy-free diet, supplements or medications to calm the brain. Stimulants usually make things worse. A ring of fire is the kind of case that before I came to Amen Clinics, I do an evaluation. Somebody seemed to have uncomplicated ADD. I give them a stimulant, a prescription for a stimulant. They go home, and in 2 days they call me telling me they're climbing the walls, they're moody, irritable, or I get a call from the parent or the spouse. Say, okay, they had an idiosyncratic reaction. Idiosyncratic just means you don't know what's going on. And so, okay, you know, that happens. Not everybody reacts well to every medication. So let's try another one. So I give another medication, different medication. Same thing happens. And so you try this 2 or 3 times and you can't figure out what's going on, so you get angry at the patient. So this is, now that we're able to do scans, I know why that happens. Type 7, anxious ADD. This is ADD plus anxiety, nervousness, tension, and so forth. These are the basal ganglia here, which are very overactive. And the basal ganglia correspond to anxiety. So what do you do? Relaxation techniques, boost GABA, boost dopamine. Stimulants alone without calming down the basal ganglia can make things worse by increasing anxiety. So you have to calm first. So there's a summary of the 7 ADD subtypes, which we've just covered, and a little bit more ADD throughout the life cycle. Go ahead, Britt, please. So in childhood, and this is, I guess, before childhood technically, they were active in the womb, often colicky kids, wear parents out, usually first diagnosed by teachers, handwriting coordination, etc. ADD in adolescence, most outgrow hyperactivity. That's the physical hyperactivity, but the other things may remain. And you can see demoralization. As you get up into middle school and beyond, of course, you really have to be able to keep it together and organize your darn notebook, which they grade you on, and so forth. And it's a problem. And impulsivity, if it continues, you know, family conflict, pregnancy, substance abuse, etc. Next slide, please. ADD in adults. People with ADD in adulthood can be very successful if they wind up in the right position. Often they will have job changes, and some of my adult patients have had drastic job changes, going from one career to another, and some of them are able to make it work. It's amazing. Marital and relationship problems can be common. Often they'll move. Sleep problems. They often have difficulty in transitioning from wakefulness to sleep or sleep to wakefulness. And things can get worse around menopause. Next slide. TV, video games can make things worse. The sedentary lifestyle, the standard American diet, the SAD diet, we call it. And then stimulants are mixed bag. Of course, lots of people use caffeine to stimulate themselves. But too much caffeine it's kind of like a roller coaster. You have a crash when it wears off. And caffeine is a vasoconstrictor and a diuretic. It shrinks down blood vessels and you get less blood flow to the brain, which is not so good. Okay, next one. Limit TV and video games, walk outside. I often wonder what we're missing by most of us working in these big metal boxes like we're in right now. And what factors in the environment have synchronized our biology over eons, and we're losing that now. Make sure you sleep well, eliminate caffeine, nicotine, etc. Eat right. Next slide. Here's healing ADD through food. There are lots of studies on food and food colorings related to people with ADD. And this has been borne out by my own experience, but not everybody benefits from these things. A lot of people do benefit from an elimination diet to find out what issues they're sensitive to, or a gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And some benefit markedly from eliminating artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, but not everybody. Not everybody. But these things are worthwhile to be tried. Next slide. Protein breakfast. There's a sense that the stimulants don't work as well unless you have, if you're taking stimulant medication, doesn't work as well unless you take have a protein breakfast, try an elimination diet for several weeks, small meals, basic supplements, vitamins, zinc. So have very clear goals. Next slide. We talk about the one-page miracle. One-page miracle is something that it's one page, and Dr. Amen talks about it in How to Get Out of Your Own Way, one of the books he had written. And it's basically a sheet that is very easy to do. Take one page and you write down on it, relationships, schoolwork, etc., the key areas of your life.
And then you write the major goals you have, you know. And you post it, maybe you put it on your bathroom mirror or on the refrigerator so you see it every day. And the idea is that by keeping these major goals in front of you, you're less likely to get sidetracked and more likely to achieve your goals. Next slide. Study your work in a career you love. I think that's obvious. ADD is a family disorder, and that's why when we're doing an evaluation of a child or a teen with ADD, we will ask certain questions of the parents, and often one or both of the parents will have ADD. So, and go back, I'll save that slide until the last one. That's my funny slide. Yeah. With children with ADD, if one or both of the parents has ADD, the parents may have great difficulty even managing diet changes, medication. I have one woman who's a parent of she brought her 2 children to see me, but she, despite her great efforts, has not been able to organize herself enough to have her children take medication and supplements in the way we would like it to happen. So parents may need treatment too, we need to keep that in mind. Anyway, so here's my last slide, which doesn't really have anything to do with families, but this is, how do you know unless you look? This is one of Dr. Amen's catchphrases, and I don't know if you can see it in the back, but it's a guy with a bagpipe at a guild, and 2 kids looking at him, so a little bit risque. So how do you know unless you look is, Dr. Amen uses that phrase to emphasize that we see things, we learn things by SPECT scanning that you wouldn't learn otherwise. And I also like the idea, how do you know unless you look? Can you see something unless you have it in mind? Very early on in my career, I was taught certain things, ADD, you outgrow it in adulthood, or I was also taught that, the incidence of sexual abuse of young girls is like 1 in 150,000. I mean, now we know it's 1 in 3, 1 in 2. But this is what the literature said, so we didn't keep that in mind. And if you don't keep it in mind, as a clinician, you don't ask questions about it, and you don't see it, In a way, you don't see what you don't expect to see. So you have to have some of these things in mind. And often people will say they don't believe in this or they don't believe in that, it's often they don't understand it, they don't have information about it. But once they know about something, like Shoshana Schomburg will speak about Irlen syndrome in a little bit, which is common in people with ADD. But it's a little known but very common visual processing issue. But unless you have it, sort of this index of suspicion in your mind, you don't see it. But when you're aware of it, you see it all over. So very common. Anyway, I will pause here, and we have some time for questions, if you'd like some questions.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Because I don't remember everything you showed me about the brain.
You don't remember everything?
If we get his book.
Yes, it's all in the book, in that book with the Healing ADD book with the green book.
Understand
Yes, and it's there's a lot of good information on the Amen website too that you could go to. Yes.
Okay, if you could just repeat the questions for the webinar.
I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you, Britt. The questioner was asking, where is some of this information? Is it in Dr. Amen's ADD book? And yes, it's in the Healing ADD book and on the Amen website. So, yes, yeah.
I'm not really clear how you distinguish the classic ADD. Is it that it has all of the other symptoms? Because some of them are conflicting. I'm not really sure. Because you mentioned the list of symptoms in
right,
classic, and
yes.
then you mentioned, is it that they have all the symptoms of the other 6?
No, the classic ADD, if you look in what's called do you know what the DSM, I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. So the questioner is asking, how do you differentiate the classic ADD from the others, or does classic have all of them? So the answer, the classic doesn't necessarily have all of them, but classic has both the inattentive aspect, so the inattentive issues, focus, attention, concentration, etc., and also the hyperactive impulsive ones. So the types 1 and 2 in Dr. Amen's nosology are very similar to, if you look in the DSM, the official psychiatric Bible. So it's type 1 is the hyperactive impulsive ADD subtype. Type 2 is the inattentive according to DSM.
Okay, can I ask
So.
a follow-up question?
Yes.
You mentioned that most often either adult males or women don't have the hyperactive piece of it. But I've also heard, I don't know if you mentioned or I heard it elsewhere about that it can be hyperactivity kind of in your head, like the overfocusing. Is that the same thing? So if somebody has that overfocusing, is that considered hyperactivity, but inside your head?
You know, yes and no. So the question is, about hyperactive. That does every, you know, if somebody doesn't have motoric hyperactivity, do they have hyperactivity in their mind? Often individuals who are hyperactive when they're younger lose that hyperactivity. So outwardly they can sit still, etc. But if you talk to them or they describe what's going on in their mind, they'll say their mind is racing. The kind of the excessive mental activity that you'll get with somebody with overfocused ADD, which is type 3, it's a kind of hyperactivity, but it's not the only kind of mental hyperactivity. So that's kind of a stuckness, a loop, whereas the other sort of the more broad mental hyperactivity is thoughts going almost here, there, everywhere, like the ping pong ball machine that they use when they play bingo. Yes. Yes, please.
You said earlier that for a person with ADD, that the harder they try, the harder it gets.
Yes.
So my question is, what is the solution to that effort paradox? You know, how does one get around that?
Well, the solution is to optimize brain. I'm sorry, let me repeat the question again. How many times will it take until I remember to repeat the question? So the individual was asking about the paradox that the harder you try, the worse your brain gets. So what's the solution to that? And I guess I could say, you know, a Zen solution, wax on, wax off from Karate Kid, but the more seriously, the solution is to optimize brain functioning and improve the inferior orbital aspect of the brain. So by doing those things, food, exercise, supplements, maybe medication. Neurofeedback is something that we didn't mention, but that can be very helpful if you have brain trauma, hyperbaric oxygen. So there are a number of things one can do to improve that part of the brain. And even apart from improving it, which is necessary, if you can accept that part of yourself or accept that that's the way your brain works, you tend not to feel quite as bad about yourself. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a client who is extremely inattentive, has a real combination of these symptoms. And the two things that stand out the most are he's extremely inattentive and extremely moody.
Yeah.
Would Limbic work for this client, do you think?
So the question is, this woman has a client who is extremely inattentive and extremely moody, and would Lamictal work? Lamictal is a mood stabilizer, anticonvulsant. It calms down the limbic system. It stabilizes the temporal lobes. It may well, you know, ideally that individual would have a scan, and we could really predict better with the scans whether that would help. But sometimes you'll see people who have moodiness in which the moodiness improves if you just give a stimulant, but oftentimes you do need a mood stabilizer first. So I think that's what I would do based on what you told me. Lamictal first, then maybe a stimulant. Yes, back there, please.
I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first is comorbidity. My 8-year-old son has reactive attachment disorder.
Yes.
So if you look at a brain scan, you might see increased activity in the limbic section.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know the difference between whether it's the RAD, the attachment disorder, versus ADD?
Well, so the question is, this woman has an 8-year-old child with a diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder. And she's saying if we did the scans, we might see the limbic system being overactive, and I would agree with that. So how would we tease that out, you know, from, you know, is it RAD, is it ADD? Well, if we had the ability to do scans, that could help us sort it out. If the limbic system were overactive, but it wasn't a ring of fire, that would say one thing. If the limbic system's overactive, but the prefrontal cortex is low, then that says something else. It's a So if you have low prefrontal cortex, it's probably ADD, and you can have both things together. So you're right about there can be comorbidity. We didn't emphasize it very much, but there's significant comorbidity with anxiety, depression, OCD, panic attacks, a number of conditions. Yes, please.
2 questions from me. I'm curious to know, just so we understand the answer. What is that inattentive? Very quickly, what is that inattentive?
Oh, reactive attachment?
Yes, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
What is that?
Reactive attachment disorder is a condition that you can see. Often we see it in children who've been adopted, in which the thought is, either because of life experiences or other issues, that the bonding doesn't. I'm sorry. I realize I didn't repeat the question again. What is RAD, reactive attachment disorder? So it has to do with the bonding, the early attachment. It's thought that these individuals, these children, somehow lack a capacity to bond. Maybe I'll ask you, does that describe it accurately?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Or actually, that sometimes bonding with complete strangers.
Uh-huh.
Because the way he sees attachment is
Yeah.
absolutely messed up.
Yes.
And the other question is, what's the link with dyslexia? My son has dyslexia. He's 8.5. He has dyslexia. What's the link with ADD and dyslexia? What's the...
Well, the question is, what's the link between ADD and dyslexia? We see them together commonly. Some individuals with dyslexia actually have Irlen syndrome, and if they get it evaluated and treated for Irlen, the apparent dyslexia goes away. Shoshana nods, as well she should. Other individuals with dyslexia, I have found, have a kind of processing issue or working memory issue, that when you treat the ADD, the apparent dyslexia goes away. But in other situations, it's probably a case of comorbidity. That is, that you can have ADD and you can have learning issues, and you know why they're linked. I'm not sure that people know.
But he's got a visual processing, slow, very slow. So
Yeah.
maybe something would.
Do you want to say something, or you want to say it a little bit
I can
later?
address that in my time.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what she was saying.
About
Okay.
timing and the visual system.
Yeah. Okay. Another question back here?
Yes, sir. You mentioned earlier there are supplements to treat ADD. Would you have to be prescribed those by a doctor, or would you have to go to a store and find the supplements?
You don't need to be. Yeah. What is this, number 6 or 7 that I've forgotten it? Okay. My colleague is reminding me Dr. K, to repeat the question. With nutritional supplements that address ADD, do you have to be prescribed those by a physician? No, you don't. It can be helpful to consult physicians who know something about them, but you don't need, anybody can go to a health food store, or at my local Giant or Harris Teeter, I can get L-tyrosine and phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine and SAMe and all kinds of things. So there's lots of stuff available over the counter. And okay.
I have the second part of my question.
Okay.
Thanks. So this is a brilliant approach, these subtypes.
Yes.
What is it going to take for more people who work in the medical profession, whether they're general practitioners or pediatricians or psychiatrists, psychologists, to understand that there are more than just 3 types of ADD and just toss Ritalin at us?
The question is, this is a great approach with subtyping ADD. What's it going to take for the rest of the medical profession, for the mental health field, to sort of be open to this, to accept it? I don't know. We debate this a lot. You would think that the field would be very open to something like this, which is exciting and, more importantly, very helpful clinically. I think, well, I don't know. I mean, it's partly political. The fact that Dr. Amen is not in a kind of a research center, but he's a clinician with these different clinics, and people, I think people would prefer, well, if you were at Harvard doing this or Hopkins, it would be more acceptable. I mean, I don't actually believe that's true, but
Doctor,
there's a bias.
I have a question
Yes.
on the webinar.
Oh, okay, yes.
With someone who presents with classic depression symptoms and moderate ADD, not hyper, should one treat the mood and see if ADD improves?
Yeah, the question is, if somebody has depression and inattentive ADD, should you treat the mood first? And yes, it's kind of a rule of thumb that if somebody has a mood issue, you treat that. And if you treat the mood issue, the apparent ADD may go away or may not, but sometimes it will. Same thing with bipolar issues. My rule of thumb is that virtually everybody with a bipolar label also has ADD issues, but not the converse. So not everybody ADD is bipolar, but everybody bipolar is ADD. And if you address the bipolar issues, often the apparent ADD issues go away, but not all the time. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned the elimination diet, but I wasn't quite sure what you meant to eliminate, and that's my kind of first question.
Okay.
And the second question has to do, what is your take on racetams?
So question, the second question, what's my take on racetam? You talk about paracetam and so forth. I don't know that much. They're so-called nootropics. They're substances that apparently help the brain heal, optimize the brain, but I don't know that much. We'll recommend them sometimes. The first question had to do with elimination diets. What is eliminated? You can find a lot of information about this on the internet. One place to go would be the website of Dr. Doris Rapp, R-A-P-P. Dr. Rapp is a pediatrician who's been really a pioneer in environmental medicine. She wrote I have a book in my office by Dr. Rapp, I think it's called Our Toxic World. I have a couple others. Really written a phenomenal amount of stuff, very important work on allergies. She has a video on the YouTube, and I'll get back to elimination diets in a moment, but she has a video on the YouTube. She's in Arizona, and she was consulted one time. They built a new middle school, and they moved all the kids into the middle school, and they started in the fall, and all the kids started getting sick. So of course, and teachers as well, administration. And so they called in the experts and nothing was found, and then they called in Dr. Rapp, so she went in and she cut out a piece of the carpet and took it, and there's a video of this which I've seen. So she put the carpet in like a glass box with a mouse in there, and she had a fan blowing across the carpet toward the mouse, and the mouse was dead within an hour. So establishing that this was a sick building, so powerful stuff. Anyway, so Dr. Rapp advocates elimination diets, and an elimination diet is a diet that removes most things from your diet that people are sensitive to. So it's a diet of meat, sort of beef, green beans, pear juice, water, tea. That's about it. So it's a very limited diet. So you do that. So let's say you did that for 2 or 3 weeks and you go, I'm really feeling better. So then you say, okay, I wonder what it is that I've removed that caused the problem. So then you begin adding back your food items one at a time. You add back maybe cheese, and then you eat a lot of it. You might eat cheese 3 times a day for a couple days. And if you don't get any reaction to that, then okay, it's probably not cheese. Let me eat pasta. And so you're able to pinpoint what caused the problem. So it can be very helpful. Yes.
Hey, how are you? With the increase of medical marijuana and recreational marijuana being legalized in different states, but with a very low amount of studies that are able to be done, if at all, what do you think the effectiveness of marijuana or derivatives, cannabinoid derivatives, would have on ADD? And would you support or at least be interested in studies once that becomes something that can be studied?
Well, I mean, we're always interested in studies. Thank you. Reminder number 9, maybe. Yes, the questioner was asking about what do I think about the impact of marijuana. We have medical marijuana. It seems like there's, marijuana legalization occurring throughout the country. And would I be interested in studies? You know, of course we're interested in studies. It's very clear that there are some patients we see here who love marijuana, and the marijuana seems to calm down a kind of inner restlessness, churning that they have, and it's difficult to find a prescription medication that can do it as well for some of these people. Not all of them, but some of them. The problem with marijuana, and I'm not talking about legally or philosophically, I'm talking brain-wise now. The problem with marijuana is it seems to deactivate the temporal lobes and deactivate the prefrontal cortex. So from a brain function point of view, it seems to do negative things. And my colleague, Dr. Liz Stoller, who's a substance abuse specialist, isn't here today, but you know, she said vehemently, you know, she does not favor legalization because of the, you know, all the problems we've seen here. Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up? Just that,
Go ahead. Yes.
Or maybe it's a statement, just that I would be interested in studies that would look at the different varieties. There's 2 predominant cannabinoids within the plant that really are focused on CBD and THC, and I'd be interested to see if there is a difference essentially with affecting those regions.
I would be too. The questioner, and I remembered this myself, all by myself, but I appreciate the backup, really I do. Questioner was saying he would be interested in studies that look at there are different strains of marijuana, and actually a couple of my patients have taught me about this. They tell me, you know, I use, and I don't remember the details, but I use, you know, when I want to mellow out or go to sleep, I use one strain. If I got to study, I use another strain. And you know, and I guess that makes sense that, you know, the Mother Nature has evolved these plants with different compounds, and, you know, that humans can learn about it. So you know, I would be interested in that. I'm not aware of any studies that have done that. But I guess let's do one more question, and then we ought to. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
If an individual is diagnosed with both type 2 and type 3 ADD, which diet should the individual follow, since the diet suggestions for each type are opposite?
Well, the diet, so the question is, if somebody's diagnosed with type 2 and type 3, what should you follow? I think, my view is that I would follow a high protein, lower carb diet. I think that is most helpful for the combination. And then how about one more question for here? So
just to follow up on the marijuana and the ADHD, if I have an 18-year-old who's, you know, trying marijuana and is on ADHD medication, is there a concern putting a stimulant medication and a marijuana in it? I mean, other than she shouldn't be using it, but not that I know of, but I mean, yep. Mea culpa. So repeating the question, an 18-year-old teen on stimulant medication with ADD, on stimulant medication, trying out some marijuana, is there a concern other than the general concern about substance abuse and so forth? And I said, in general, there's not an interaction that I'm aware of with the stimulant medication. Doesn't mean it's a good thing to do. And we've seen a number of people really get psychotic on marijuana. I think we've all heard about that, and you know, don't always know why, but people have had really bad reactions sometimes. Not all the time.
So you said it, marijuana makes the temporal lobes lower in density? Right.
Does marijuana lower the temporal lobe functioning? It does, and the prefrontal cortex. So. Well, thank you for your attention and great questions. And so let me present Shoshana Schaumburg, Shoshana and I have worked very closely together. She's seen dozens and dozens of my patients, and my own daughter, who may be one of the worst Irlen cases we've seen. But my daughter has been helped very much by Irlen and by Shoshana, so when you've seen it work, you become a believer. So, Shoshana.
Shoshana, give me just a second to get your...
Okay.
And
in the meantime, I'll give you a little introduction.
Okay, so put that on and then...
I don't like these things.
Wow.
Say hi. Okay. Is that,
Okay,
can you
now,
hear me back
yeah,
there?
now it's on, yeah.
Everybody okay back there? Okay. I'm an occupational therapist, a special educator, Irlen diagnostician, and anybody ever hear of brain gym? So I'm also a brain gym instructor. So I focused my practice on the neurobiology of the human body and the mind, and especially on children, but I also work with a lot of adults. I worked for 25 years in the public school system and in private schools, working with kids with learning issues and also physically impaired children with developmental disabilities. Irlen method, I can honestly say, transformed my entire practice after 35 years in practice. And the reason is that, as Dr. Annibali said, ADD previously did not have designated categories, so treatments were very general, and you didn't always know which medication was going to work for which person. In the sensory processing area, which is found in a lot of people with ADD and other issues like dyslexia, there are many factors contributing to that. And when you get a diagnosis of dyslexia or ADD and no one's telling you, like the Amen Clinic, specifically where in the brain and what are the factors related to this issue, that general hit or miss kind of treatment, it could take years. It could never resolve. So finding a piece of the puzzle, that's what we call Irlen is not a cure. It's one piece of the puzzle in the profile of someone with sensory processing overload, we call it. And everybody probably has sensory processing overload at some time in their life. So let's take an example. When you're in a car and you're in a heavy rainstorm and you're driving and your kids are in the car and they're fighting in the back seat and the radio's on blasting and somebody comes along on the side and you barely can see what's going on because the torrential rain is coming down and cuts you off, what happens? Right? People go, well, maybe some brave people might say, oh, I'm going to show that guy. But most people would say, okay, everybody quiet, I got to concentrate. Okay, let me turn off the radio. Oh, I got to concentrate. Oh, and your vision narrows, your hearing becomes acute, your body becomes tense, and you are driving and you're fighting for your life. So imagine somebody with ADD is like that neurologically probably all the time. They're in their brainstem. They are fighting for their life because they got to hold it together. Someone with dyslexia, same thing. They know they're smart, but why are they not functioning? Why are they not? No one's telling them anything, but they're giving them pills and reading remediation or whatever it is. But no one's telling them, why is it that this is happening? So we backtrack. Okay, it gets back to the car. Okay, you're in your brainstem. Okay, and you're telling everybody quiet, don't talk to me, I gotta concentrate. You're very, very focused, and you're very narrow. Okay, then the sun comes out, the rain stops. You decide, oh, I think I'll get off the highway and go on Route 1. There's some nice farms out there, it's a nice road, not a lot of traffic. Nobody's on the road, the sun is out, the flowers are beautiful, the trees, the birds, and you just take a deep breath. Okay, sensory modulation. Okay, all those hypersensitive areas in your body, in your hearing, your vision, your kinesthesia, your proprioception, everything is relaxing. You're able to take more in. You're able to process information in a clear and organized way. So let's take just one area. This could go on forever because we have so many senses that are affected by our everyday stressors. But let's take Irlen method. And if you could, Irlen method is evaluated on a deeper level for what we call spectral filters for glasses by an Irlen diagnostician. The diagnostician has to have a master's degree or higher. Many people in our network are doctors, and they're medically based and also educationally based. And then we have the doctors here who actually can look at brain scans and actually see issues of possible Irlen syndrome. We also look at medical issues, heavily on academic issues, but if you're a worker, I see a lot of adults, we would look at work-related productivity and also migraines and other sensory issues, anxiety issues, and also these type of issues. So organization, problem solving, communication, handwriting, and reading, math. Any musicians here? Okay, so reading music score is often a stressor for people who have this issue. So they learn to play by ear. They only read the music when they have to. Get up on stage, the lights are bothering them. You know, a lot of the clients I see are from Peabody Music School, and they get up on stage and they're like, oh God, it's horrible, but I keep it together and then I just fall apart after I get off stage. Because what Irlen syndrome is affected by is mostly light. Okay, it's called scotopic sensitivity syndrome, which means light sensitivity. And it's one sensory processing disorder. There's many. Okay, this is a visual sensory processing disorder, and it is caused by we think a timing issue in the visual system, where there's two cells, parvo and magnocellular. And one is a slow-acting cell, one is a fast-acting cell, and when your brain is overloaded by light, that timing is off. Kind of like a watch. If one little gear in the watch is off, it throws the whole watch off. So if one little area of timing is off in the visual system, the two eyes can't work together, the brain can't process information properly, so it's not accurate, it's not stable. And in autism, which is often found in scotopic sensitivity is found in autism, it can be a very scary world because faces can look like puzzle pieces that aren't put together. Temple Grandin, I just met her 3 weeks ago, spent time with her, and she promotes Irlen screenings for every person with autism because it's so prevalent in autism. But it is also very prevalent in ADD and dyslexia. And often dyslexia is misdiagnosed. Irlen is not a cure. So we don't claim to cure dyslexia. But if the lenses can help decrease stress in the visual system and enable the brain to process visual information more accurately, then a lot of the symptoms of academic performance will go away, or they'll be minimized. You have to have the skills. It's not a miracle. If you can't read, it's not going to make you read. But if you have the skills and your brain can't access those skills, then it can help you calm down and release that anxiety that's keeping you stuck and keeping your sensory system from working efficiently. Okay. And if somebody could give me time, because I don't have.
Well, I think
because I don't
maybe 5 to 10 minutes, I would think.
Another 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to be able to go over all my slides, but I think they're posted on, will they be posted on the website?
We can send them out if you
Okay,
want, yeah.
because a lot of the information is very valuable. It has research, and I'm not going to go over a lot of it, but please feel free to download it. I also have these little wristbands for everybody. If you go in the room that has the food, and my website and also telephone number are here, and I do 15-minute free consultations. So if you think you might know somebody with Irlen syndrome, I can, kind of guide you to the right person.
Where's your office real quick? Is it in Reston?
Well, here.
Oh, here.
Yeah, here.
Yeah. Perfect.
And also in Baltimore.
Excellent.
Okay, and Richmond, Virginia, we also see people. Okay, so I'm not going to go over this, but it often runs in families. It's often developmental, unless the person has a condition such as Lyme disease or a head trauma. We just finished a study on the wounded warriors, a very successful study that Helen Irlen did with head trauma and this visual perceptual issue that was disabling the vets coming home. And with the spectral filters, they were able to function again. So I can actually send that study to you if you would like. Okay. These are some of the areas of academic performance that also ADD affects. So we have reading, we have listening skills, we have math. Often, like plus signs can turn. If you have a visual distortion, what can they become? Times. And if you know the math, I have a son who's very gifted in math. When he got a B+, boy, I got called into the office. And they said, what's going on here? And I looked at the Scantron sheet, and guess what? All of the things he got wrong for the B+, which he should have gotten an A+, were at the end of the test. They don't make harder answers at the end of the test. It's mixed up. So she said to my son, you were tired. Don't you know you have to have sleep before an exam? And he's going, I knew this exam. I got enough sleep. Let me see the whole exam instead of the Scantron sheet. And he knew everything. He said, I don't understand how I got this wrong. He had light sensitivity. This is my initial introduction into my own family benefiting. He had light sensitivity due to an eye trauma. And what was happening when he would get tired, the fluorescent lights flicker and they hum, and it was bothering him, and he could see it because he was light sensitive and he was blind in one eye, but he had light issues, and he would get tired and he would misread things. It would start turning and things would start moving and glowing and sparkling, and it was very distracting. So the lenses took care of that issue right away. And it's immediate. You know in the testing session that it's working because you wouldn't go on to the lenses if you didn't see it working. Composition, test taking, and spelling. Okay. This is not a small population. 12 to 14% of the general population of gifted and good readers probably has this issue, but they compensate really well. And they may have a mild case, which may not, may come up as anxiety, a little, exhaustion, or it could be severe, like in the case of dyslexia and autism and severe ADHD and ADD. 46% of those with specific learning disabilities and reading problems have this issue. It could be mild to severe. 33% of individuals with ADD and ADHD and behavior problems. We have studies, the Irlen Network has studies in the prison school systems. So we found a very high degree of juvenile offenders in these prison school systems actually have this sensitivity. And what are they under all the time? They don't go out very much. What are they under? Fluorescent lighting. That makes it worse. And individuals with autism and certain medical and visual problems. So I've got like 3 minutes. You know what? I'm going to keep going because this is more educational. You can look at that. Keep going. So these are some of the people that we see in terms of the conditions. It also comes up in a lot of neurological conditions. And it's a processing issue. There we got the magnocellular. It can be genetic, so I've seen 4 generations of people. One, a great-grandmother, read in the dark. They thought Granny was old, she read in the dark, so what? Okay, she's weird. Now, Grandma wore sunglasses inside and outside the house. That was Grandma looking, she's a sunglass lady. The son, who's the father of the child, had chronic migraines, and he was a computer programmer. He couldn't function when he came home from work. He was basically a non-existent father except on weekends, and he was miserable. The child had severe dyslexia, and it's all the same issue. Okay, genetic predisposition to light sensitivity. It can be varied and intermittent. It can come up more when the person's tired. So when I test a person, I kind of have to stress them out and make them tired in order to get the results. So a lot of times at the end of the day, it's much better for me to test. And it's enhanced by environmental stressors, which isn't really brought up in a lot of literature about these conditions, but sensory stressors and environmental stressors can play a huge factor in attention and focus. So by eliminating some of those stressors, so I would test, if you guys want to find out about scotopic sensitivity syndrome, let's turn on the fluorescent lights in here. Can anybody do that?
Yep, I got it.
Okay. Now just notice what happens when we turn up the fluorescent lights.
Oh.
How many people love that? You love it. So you wouldn't be somebody I would probably see. How many people really have a negative reaction to it? Okay. So if it affects your life, if you're working in an office building, or you're working in a school, or you're at home, your kitchen, a lot of people in their kitchens or in their dens, they have fluorescent lighting, you might want to think about LEDs. Because now you can change the fluorescence fairly inexpensively and put LEDs, and you can put LEDs on a dimmer, and they don't hum, and they don't flicker. And the spectral band on an LED light is a much wider band. You get more color in your visual system, which is much healthier for the human eye.
These aren't very good, but they give you a lot of light.
They give you a lot of light, right? So it's if you need the intensity. A lot of people, like my son who had the eye injury, he would come home from school, do his homework in the dark. My husband would turn up the light and go, "You can't do your homework in the dark. you're gonna go blind. Then I go out to my Irlen training with Helen Irlen in California, and I mentioned it, and she said, can you get your husband on your cell phone? And this lady is tough. So she gets him on the cell, she goes, tell me about, do you tell your son to turn on the light when he says it feels better to turn off the light? He goes, yeah, everybody knows that. You know, all the eye doctors say, if you turn off the light, you're gonna ruin your eyes. She said, it's the opposite for your son. He's telling you what he needs. Let him do it. So we had to do it in his room because we all couldn't function in the dark. So it can impact the family if you're not, you know, if you're not careful to kind of negotiate. Patterns are also, how many people see that, like woman in the polka dots? Like I have to be really careful when I test what kind of clothes to wear. A striped shirt. I have clients who, if I wore a striped shirt like that, they would get nauseous immediately and I wouldn't be able to test them. So people who get bothered by patterns, busy patterns, rugs, you know, walls, that kind of thing. So if they get nauseous or feel a little queasy and uneasy, that would be an issue. And that might be scotopic. Stress levels under these kind of lights. Does anybody want me to turn off the lights now? Yeah. Okay. And also, in an educational setting, we're not changing anything. Okay, if you have a good reading program, this is it's not really a method. I think it's a technology. I think that by calling it Irlen method, I think it's doing a disservice. It should be Irlen technology. And it is called assistive technology in a school setting. So sometimes you can get it into the IEP or the 504 plan. Okay, I only have like 1 minute.
Can we talk about the therapy? I mean, we know what the syndrome is now.
Yeah, let me show you the
therapy for it, or is there not a?
The intervention. Yeah, that would be a good idea. So the
just
intervention is 1
lenses?
or 2 sessions. Okay, the first session would be colored overlays, and I actually brought them with me, so you can kind of see what they look like. It's using these colored overlays over reading material or a computer screen to see if it decreases some of the anxiety and the stress, and it increases endurance for reading, so attention and focus. Also decreases visual distortion, so the accuracy. You can put it over math, over music score. A lot of the musicians are using these overlays. So, and you also can photocopy written material on colored paper, so finding the color that calms you down the most. It may not be what you think is your favorite color, but it may also be that's why it's your favorite color, because it calms you down the most. So I can pass this around, and you can look at it. And that's the first session. That will tell me if you're a candidate for the spectral filters. And those are glasses. And I have a pair of glasses. I have actually my son's glasses because he doesn't get bothered by daylight. He got bothered by fluorescent lights, and he's working on a farm now. And he says, I don't have Irlen syndrome. I'm great. You can keep my glasses. So I have his glasses I can show you. Some people have 1 layer of color. Some people have 30 layers of color. It takes 2 to 4 hours to test, and it's 1 session. Sometimes there's a tweaking that has to happen because what you don't know, you don't know. So sometimes that first session, you really don't know. It feels good, but maybe it's not the most accurate because you're just feeling good and you can't fine tune that. The second session, I can fine tune and get it better. So also, I just want to go quickly forward, just show you the distortions. Keep going, keep going. Oh, here's a typical Irlen kid in school. Okay. Okay, the klutzy kid, the one who can't catch the ball. Okay, let's keep going, keep going. So this is all going to be on the website. Keep going, keep going. All right. This is research. I want to get to the end. Okay, so just keep going. Okay. Sorry. And I just want to show you the visual distortions real quick. So this is what happens when, this is the timing issue. That's one of the studies. Okay, we're almost there. Keep going. Okay, this is called washout. This is when the letters look washed out. You blink, they get clear again. Okay, but it's very distracting because the letters can start fading out, and also it can be uneven on a page or on a computer screen or on music score. Okay, keep going. Halo effect. This is when there's a shadow or a ghost around the letter. Blink your eye, gets better because you're relaxing the eye a little bit. Gets worse as you read. So the person with Irlen for dyslexia, they start out reading, could be 1 minute or 5 minutes or an hour, but then it degrades. In typical dyslexia, it starts out, they have problems, and they end, they have problems. It doesn't get worse as they get more tired. That's an indicator. Okay, keep going. Blurry, they go to the eye doctor, one eye doctor, and they're like, it's blurry, you gave me glasses, it doesn't work, it's blurry. How come it doesn't work? Why aren't you giving me the right glasses? Keep going. Swirl. Two eyes come together, it's focused. This can be nauseating. This is in a lot of ADHD, this happens. Okay, very narrow focus. Is it, I am?
Sorry. Well, we
There's another person. But anyway, these are some of the distortions. There's 9 of them that are known and much more if you talk to the clients. But if you have any questions, please call me. And
yeah, this is, I'll just say this, you know, again, my daughter has it, so that's how we learned about it. This was before we met Shoshana, but light sensitivity, headaches, depth perception issues, reading issues, hallmark symptoms.
And attention deficit is a big issue.
Traumatic brain injury, Lyme disease, ADD, autism spectrum, and other conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee that everyone in this room knows somebody with Irlen, but you don't know that you know it.
Right, right. And you don't know that you have it.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
And there's probably at least a handful of people in here who have Irlen and don't know it. So.
But unless it's a functional problem,
yeah.
It's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we're coming to an end, but if anybody would like to stay, Sue Johnston is planning to do or offering a relaxation, what would you say, Sue, a relaxation experience?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, so, and she's done this for us and plans to do more. So would you do it in this room, Sue?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.